hour as close to on the dot as we can, and we will get started. Good morning, everyone. All right. As they say, punctuality is the courtesy of kings and queens, so we're going to get things going. Good day, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. I'm your host, John Shea. Welcome to the latest installment of the Winning the Challenger Sales series. Today's topic, how to reframe your top targets. And we are in it, folks. If you're on a December 31st fiscal year end, this is crunch time, right? These next 4 months are where we really execute. So bravo to you for joining today to up your game. The next 30 minutes together are going to be a fun one. Thanks again for joining. As a quick recap from our conversation last time, how to capture attention by leading with insight. We talked about there are no shortcuts for creating demand. Before we can have and engage in that two-way dialogue with our customers, really have that commercial insight choreography, we must first spark their interest by sharing a hypothesis or asking a question in our initial outreach, email, phone, and social, which leads us to today's conversation. Once we've secured the meeting, now we need to reach out and create demand. So this is part 2 of our engage conversation, back to the tempo framework that we introduced to you on one of the first episodes. Our topic today, as I mentioned, how to reframe your top targets. We're going to talk about pressure testing your commercial insight, the keys to building credibility, solving the reframe equation, and what does challenger discovery process look like? My guest today is Ms. Patek Hawkins. I'm so thrilled to have her. She's got a illustrious 20-year career in sales, formerly at Zoom, everywhere from the bottom of the barrel, prospecting, outreach, all the way to the top of sales leadership. One of the most capable and savviest enablement folks, commercial leaders I've ever worked with. So I was so thrilled that she agreed to join me for this conversation today. She currently serves as the head of enablement learning and development at Fivetran. If you don't know Fivetran, I believe the latest, or one of the latest Silicon Valley unicorns, $1.2 billion valuation. Patek, thanks so much for joining. And before I tee you up in the wrong way, you are on mute. So I know everyone wants to play conference call bingo this morning, but thanks again so much for joining me, Patek.
Yeah, I'm really excited, John. And I see some of the people have 4 weeks to close their year. So if you have any questions, ask away, see if we can help you out. I'm sure between John and I, we can find something to help you out, something to take away tactical that you can start implementing and start making an impact right away. You're really excited to be here, John.
Thanks so much, Patek. So for those that have joined us before, we pre-recorded this conversation between Patek and I to ensure that we have no technology challenges. So what Patek and I are going to do is we're going to turn off our videos. We're going to play the recording of our conversation. It does run longer than we have before, about 39 minutes. So we're going to take questions from all of you. If you can hang out with us beyond the allotted time, we're going to answer questions throughout and at the end. So we'll come back and answer those. So with that, Catherine, if you don't mind, you can share your screen and we'll share the recording. And I'll go ahead and turn my video off. All right, so let's get into it, Patek. I read an absolutely fantastic book called The Catalyst by Jonah Berger. He's a professor at the Wharton School of Business at the University of Pennsylvania. And this whole book is about how to change anyone's mind. And he presents a framework how to do so. I can't recommend it enough to all the listeners to pick it up and read it. But he refers to a famous study at Stanford where they gave a bunch of students a scenario. They said, all right, you've just passed a very difficult qualifying exam after, frankly, an exhausting semester. And you've been presented an opportunity to take a 5-day holiday vacation to Hawaii. It's at a very exceptional price. What do? Do you buy the trip? Do you not buy the trip? Or do you pay a $5 fee to extend the offer for 48 hours and delay the decision? And the students overwhelmingly chose
to buy the trip. Now, they said, okay, great. Now they went back to a different group of students and said, all right, same scenario, but you failed the test. And the students still overwhelmingly chose to buy the trip. But what happens when that group of researchers went to a third group and said, okay, you're still awaiting the results. Now, if you chose to go on the trip if you passed the test, and you still chose to go on the trip if you failed the test, it shouldn't matter if you're still awaiting the results, right? It makes all the sense in the world. You passed, it's a celebration. You failed, it's the world's best consolation prize. But what happened when we introduced uncertainty was the students overwhelmingly chose to defer the decision. They chose not to choose. So what do we take away from this as salespeople? What does this mean to us? Well, if we're talking to customers about what good could look like, there's a great deal of uncertainty in that process. Is my ROI going to be similar? What can I expect out of this? Do these features and benefits apply to me, etc.? But if we can come in with an approach that removes that uncertainty, rather than talks about what good could look like, we articulate what bad will look like if you continue on the status quo. That's a much more powerful message that removes the uncertainty rather than encourages that uncertainty. So I read this, I loved it. I feel like I had to share it with folks as a baseline for this conversation. Now, the beauty, or not really the beautiful thing, is that would be the wrong word to describe this. The interesting thing about uncertainty is that's really a great theme for 2020, right? That's kind of how we've all been feeling. So let's talk about something that we know for certain. I think a reference to a study that we did a few years ago, that what are some of the skills that drive customer loyalty, that makes customers keep buying to buy more, and to tell their friends to buy as well. And we know far and away the number one critical skill for sellers was demonstrating unique insight. So if we've known this for so long, conventional wisdom would say we got to be pretty good at this point. Well, unfortunately, not so much. Our recent research, this assessment, the buyer study we ran in 2020, shows that on average, our buyers rate us at 50% less effective of demonstrating unique insight this year versus last year. That's a pretty monumental change, Patek, in sentiment, right? So how do we describe it? And we're still evaluating this. We're still continuing to do some follow-up research, but what's emerged is really two key items, two key drivers of this. One, first and foremost, and I don't need to tell anyone on the phone this, I don't think it's going to be surprising, is the bar is higher. There are more senior people involved in these purchase decisions, signing off on them. They're asking you more difficult questions. They want to know about the resiliency of your supply chain. They want to know about the state of your funding. They want to know about the health of individual business units. They're holding us to a higher bar. That's one. And then two, and again, this is no surprise, I think, to anyone on the phone, is, to put it plainly, people are pretty pissed off right now for a whole multitude of very justified reasons. So sentiment is just going to skew slightly more negative. And Patek, as I mentioned, and you've been out there, you've been continuing to train salespeople and commercial folks at Fivetran, trying to continue to build the fantastic growth business you all have. I mean, what else are you seeing out there? Other things that you take away from this research when we first shared it with you?
Thanks, John. I think, there are a couple of things to take a look at, and I would like to approach this from two sides. One from the buyer side as a person who's actually purchasing for our company, and one from my background in sales. So from the buyer standpoint, we have so much going on, and we get hit by so many people reaching out to us and says, hey, I want to talk to you. And in that email context, if there's nothing out there, I'm going to delete that email. Not because I'm a bad person, but it's because there's so many other competing information coming my way, and I have my own objectives and initiatives that I'm working on. If you're not showing me why I should talk to you right now, that's going to be deleted. And again, it's not because we're trying to be bad people. It's just we don't have the bandwidth to look at something that doesn't make sense right away. So on the other side of that, being in sales, I understand the salespeople too. We give them so many great tools that they can automate everything. They have all the swanky automations and cool enablement that's coming from people like me. And they do think that should really take place of doing your homework and giving people why you now. And I can assure you that's not the case. Use the technology to help you out. But if you replace technology in a place of doing your homework and giving people why you now, why am I reaching out to you today? Why should you talk to me today? And if you do not do that, how is that going to impact you? You're going to be really hurting because people are not going to be listening to you. So we expect a ton from you, salespeople. I really feel for you. And I respect everything that you do. And one thing that I will say, the best thing that you can do for yourself right now is prioritize your homework, driving these insights if there's nothing else, and prep for that call. So I could absolutely resonate with this, and I will blame, to a certain extent, our technology and how we prioritize time.
No, it's fair, Protect, and you make a great case. We talked about this in the last webinar for folks that didn't get a chance to take a look. Capture attention by leading with insight, and just the crap, frankly, that gets sent out to people and automatically deleted. So that's great guidance for activation clients to go back and watch the replay of that in the Challenger Activation Portal. And to your point on the second one you made, and well articulated as always, I knew this was going to be how you were going to tee it up for us. So I'm so glad you joined me for this conversation. It's, let's not divorce ourselves as sellers from the responsibility here too, right? Let's not just push it back on the buyers. And I think the question that we've been asking and we've been challenging some of our clients on is, are you bringing the same message to customers now that you were in February? Said another way, how has your message changed now versus 6 or 7 months ago? So that's an opportunity for us to really pressure test that commercial insight, the message that we are bringing to customers. And a few folks on the line will probably thinking to themselves, John, we're an insight organization, right? Like we're bringing this messaging. And what we've seen is there's really three schools of thought, or three ways that you could go after customers and engage in three different types of conversations. One, of course, is that product-based message that we all know and know well, that elicits that kind of, is this essential response from the customer. The question-based, death by 1,000 paper cuts. Do I have time for this? Are the problems that I'm articulated, can this supplier actually help me solve them? And when you look at these two approaches, back to our theme of uncertainty, there's a lot of uncertainty in these two conversations. For the product-based reasons that I mentioned, my ROI is not your ROI. I'm not connecting the dots. I'm not quite sure. And the same thing for the reasons we articulated on the question-based. So the way to remove that uncertainty is to lead with that insight-based approach, to basically say, if you continue on the status quo, if you do nothing, this is what it's going to cost you. But of course, like Fivetran, right, these organizations are saying, well, we are an insight-led organization. We are bringing this conversation to customers. We have built these commercial insights. Like, we are absolutely sharing insight with customers. And we know this choreography. We know it well, the why change, why now, why us, everything from the warmer to the solution. Hey, we've built these, right? We've been trained on them. We got it. We're delivering insight. To which the question I often say back, a bit tongue-in-cheek, is, are you sure? And as you know, Patek, before COVID, I spent most of my time on the road doing about 50 or 60 sales trainings a year. So I was in front of a few thousand salespeople each year. And every time when I'd go in and train them at different stages of this journey on commercial insight, I would notice 4 common pitfalls. First and foremost, the show up and throw up. And I'll take on my persona as a salesperson for this one to basically say, oh yeah, I know y'all built this fantastic commercial insight. You've gathered folks from sales, from product, from marketing. You put some great minds together. They leverage their collective experience. It's really great messaging. But I'm just going to go out to the customer and I'm going to tell them all about us and give them the feature and benefit stuff. Hard to drive urgency, hard to drive engagement. The second is one of my favorites, the evil Knievel, right? Where you deliver your warmer and your reframe, And at the end of the reframe, the customer says, yes, that's a problem for us. And you as a seller say, great, we got a solution. Let me tell you about it. And you skip that rational and emotional case for change, the valley of despair, jump right to our solution, just like Evel Knievel would. The third, we call the puddle of despair. So you deliver your warmer, your reframe, like I mentioned. You're not quite comfortable having that really challenging constructive tension conversation. Again, that valley of despair. So I'm not going to bring you through the valley of despair. I don't want you to get your feet wet. I'm just going to bring you through that little puddle of despair. And then fourth and finally, the happy years, which is the most nuance of the pitfalls, where you deliver your warmer, you got your credibility, you have your reframe, you make your case for change in the rational drowning and the emotional impact. And at the end, or at the bottom of that valley of despair, the customer essentially says to you, you know what, you've got me. This is a problem for us. We need to do something about this. How can you all help? And the seller, as we all have at some point in our career, gets happy ears, jumps right to our solution, tells them all about us. Now, at face value, seems like not that big of a deal, but what we're missing is a critical step. That new way forward is the objective counterbalance to our reframe. If we've told them what the average organization is doing, what they're missing about that approach, if I can get you to agree to these 2 to 3 tenets of what the best organizations are doing, it's going to be really hard for you to fight me when I say that's what our solution is built to do. So the ideal customer response to that new way forward is, yeah, it'd be great if we can do that, but we don't have the resources, we don't have the time, we don't have the budget, we don't have the people. To which we, as the salesperson, can say, well, the good news is that's exactly what our solution is built to do. So as you look at these 4 pitfalls, I think the question for our audience is, which of these are you guilty of? Patek, I know you're training folks every day and you're in the weeds on a lot of these conversations, but can also have the ability and have the vantage point to escalate up. Where are you seeing some of the pitfalls as well with some of these messages? Excuse me.
That's a great question. So I onboard a new cohort every month, and I can tell you that constantly there's one theme that comes up, and they're saying, well, I'm more of a relationship builder, and I want to build this relationship, so people are talking to me. So maybe challenger skills are making sense, but what about that? So my explanation to them is that saying, hey, when you're a challenger, it's not like you're not building a report. You're actually building rapport in a way that delivers ROI. And that ROI is extremely important. There's so much value in that you're doing than just going there and asking about somebody's weekend. And I always joke about this. What if their weekend was bad? So you're going to start a conversation of bad food. But let's think about that. Exactly what you said. If you're showing up and throwing up, it's like you're going out on a date and you're telling your date all about yourself. No one wants to hear about you, right?
Wait, that's not how you're supposed to do it?
I mean, I guess not. I haven't been on dates for a while, but not in my book, at least. I try not to do that.
My poor attempt at humor, Patek.
And then to Evel Knievel, this is going to sound terrible, but I call this part making them feel sick. You know what? We're still humans. And a lot of the things that we do, the decisions that we do is by emotions. How do you get that emotion going? Make you feel sick about that a little bit. Don't skip that part, right? And you're still building value at that point. And that's that puddle of despair, right? That you're talking about, the valley of despair. And then happy ears, yes. Do not tell people right about your solution before you cover the new way. And here's the reason. As a challenger, a way to build rapport for you and your prospect is to walking them through, okay, let's imagine if there was a new way, what would you like that to look like? Get them excited about that. Mm-hmm. And then to John's point, oh, by the way, our solution is the best in the industry to do that. How much cooler is that? So yes, do not skip these steps. Still build your rapport, but do it the challenger way. I would just add that in here because you do such a great job with this.
Oh, thank you, Patek. No, but I mean, in the spirit of the Mutual Admiration Society, I think I could talk about this all day, and I do talk about it all day. And then folks that are smarter than me, like you, come in and have a great way to explain something. So I really love your point on making them feel sick and the Evel Knievel. And all I could think about was a conversation you and I have had before too, is you can still make them sick, like make them feel a little sick and be empathetic. It's kind of like, if your mom's taking care of you, right? They're still going to be empathetic to the fact that you're sick as you're going through it. And you can't miss out on that empathy. Yeah, that's well said. All right. So what are we going to do about it? Right? What's in the spirit of getting out of our own valley of despair? We're going to focus the rest of our conversation on this first part of the choreography. Why change? We only get one chance to make a first impression. So we're going to talk about the warmer and the reframe specifically with the rest of the time you and I have together. So let's unpack some of these ways to build credibility up front, to your point. Not necessarily exactly how a relationship builder would do it, but how challengers build credibility. I know, Patek, that preparation to you is everything, so I'm not going to steal your thunder on this one. You should talk our audience through what they should be doing before the call.
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of things with the preparation. It really is your secret sauce. And I love the 333 method that you see in here. If you go to the Challenger portal, you're going to have a lot of resources for that. And I highly recommend, if you haven't taken a look at that just yet, go and do that. And then when you're preparing for your call, you definitely want to have other two elements that are extremely, extremely important. One of it is that really know your why. Why am I reaching out to you? And it's that insight. Hey, when I get in front of John, I'm going to say, these are the reasons why we're meeting, because I know this is your problem. And do not get on a call before you have that written down and really feel good about that. The other part is, what's my desired outcome? Because every time you are getting on a call, you should have some sort of an outcome that you already outlined for yourself, because you've done your homework, you understand your prospects, so you can tailor it to them. Just make sure that you're walking in with that outcome and you drive that outcome throughout your entire conversation with the prospect. So I would say it's not a rocket science. There's not too much of it, but if you can do these two things, plus go through the 333, which is know the industry's changes, know the objectives of the company, and the actions that they want to address with the problems with, you will be in a really great shape.
Yeah, I obviously I couldn't agree more. And I think one of the things that I try to land, to your point on misconceptions, is you're not a challenger unless you're doing your homework.
Exactly.
If you're just kind of showing up and shooting from the hip, you're skewing much more lone wolf. So that's before the call. And all of this enables you to, during the call, really execute. And I think when folks think about this warmer, this credibility, the by the book approach is to go in and say, hello, Mr. and Mrs. Chief Marketing Officer. Based on conversations I'm having with some of your peers, these are the goals that they're focused on. These are some of the key challenges that they're faced with. How are you different from some of your peers? That's a fantastic warmer, great way to build credibility. That, again, is textbook. But there are some other ways that you can build credibility in a challenger fashion. Share an anecdote of, hey, I was talking to another CMO this morning, actually, and they were talking me through X, Y, Z. Are you faced with a similar challenge, or you got something else that's top of mind? Another great way to build credibility, draws them into the conversation. The third, summarize your key findings from your homework, your research, your experience in the industry, and really ask them for a correction to, invite that skepticism, get them to correct anything you may have misstated. We were talking to a key accounts person at a manufacturing company that's based here in the States, and she was sharing with us her credibility tactic, and I loved it. What she does is basically read back the prep work, the homework that she's done, to the prospect, to the customer at the start of the call. And then she'll say, great, that's everything I could learn before talking to you. Now tell me what I've missed or what I've gotten wrong. And like I said, I couldn't love that more. It's empathetic. There's credibility. There's some hubris. There's some humor there too. I think it's a very disarming moment. That to me is just perfect, again, textbook execution of credibility. Now, and I know you're going to love this next part too, Patek. We obviously build this credibility for sure at the upfront conversation. We've got to demonstrate that high degree of professionalism. It's critical if you're going to go in and take the challenger approach. But all of this means nothing if we can't truly engage with the customer and really listen to them. Mm-hmm. Now, I can empathize that some folks on the phone are probably thinking to themselves, wow, John, what a fantastic use of 30 minutes of my time. You're going to get up here and tell me I need to listen to my customers. But what I would challenge everyone with is this is one of those things when we talk about active listening and listening that we all know we can get better at, for sure. But it's a really difficult skill to improve. And if you don't think it's an opportunity for you to get better at this, I would just ask your significant other, right? We can all be better listeners, right? That's part of this. So I want to put everyone in the audience to the test on this. Now, let's see how this works. So here's what we're going to do. First of all, let me tell you our definition of truly listening. It's giving attention to seek better understanding of what others are saying. So with that definition in mind, we're going to test our audience's active listening. So let's see what they've got. I'm going to do this really quickly. And now, given we're on the platform here, you got two options for everyone listening. You can either say your answer out loud, or if you're willing and bold enough, document it in the chat. So I'm going to give you 3 questions. You got to pay close attention. We're going to do this pretty quickly. Let's see what you got. First and foremost, what is 12 plus 16 divided by a half? How many animals of each species did Moses take on the ark? And finally, true or false, in New York State, a man is allowed by law to marry his widow's sister. Okay, let's see how you did. Question number 1, 12 plus 16 divided by a half. Well, it's either 56 or 44, depending on whether or not you adhered to PEMDAS. Who remembers that from 7th grade math, or who even knows when we learned that in grade school? It's definitely not 14. Question number 2, the answer is none. It was not Moses' ark, it was Noah's ark. And then third and finally, if it's his widow's sister, that means the man is dead, so not applicable. Now, I'm sure folks may be a little frustrated with me saying, John, I don't know if that's essentially fair. But many of you, if you're like me, and the first time you went through this, you went 0 for 3, you might be saying to yourself, all right, maybe this is an opportunity for me to get a little better at this. So I'm going to give you a chance to redeem yourselves. I've got a bonus question for you, but this is going to be the most difficult of the 4. So if you're ready, we'll do this together. All right, here we go. No, your computer did not freeze. The internet did not go out. I want you to take special notice of what you're doing right now. You probably lean forward. Your ears are perked up. Your senses are tuned in. That is active listening. Exerting effort and taking active measures to capture what others are saying, right? And I use a favorite challenger skill of strategic silence. And I think, Patek, we're all bought in, we get it, we can get better at active listening, but how does that actually help us as salespeople? Well, I've always liked to say that sellers are really just agents of behavior change. We are in the business of behavior change. And if we want our customers to do something different, to change, we must first demonstrate understanding, have empathy, build that level of trust. And the only way to do that is through active listening and time. And this is, again, a framework that I borrowed from Jonah Berger's fantastic book, The Catalyst. I do recommend you pick it up. I really enjoyed the read. And if we at Challenger added anything to this, if we could be so bold, Jonah, would be to have another bar under active listening that says insight.
I love that, John. Also, this kind of goes back to what you mentioned before. This also ties with empathy. I think empathy is the art of caring. And if you really care, you shouldn't be just waiting for a moment for other person to stop talking so you can make your point across. This is exactly how you show empathy. You ask a question, you lead with an insight, and then you really care to understand the answer. So I love that.
Well said. I mean, and if you're making them feel sick, you got to have that empathy piece too. That's right.
Yeah. But you're like the nice, to your point, mom or the nurse. You're like, you can be sick, but I'm going to take care of you, I promise.
Well said. So let's talk about, now that credibility and active listening, we've kind of talked through those items. Obviously, this earns us the right to reframe. And this is the crux of the challenger approach. This is where the moment happens, if you will, to really move forward in that conversation. So we've obviously spent a great deal of time, great deal of resources, really trying to crack the code on messaging, on building commercial insights. And over the last 10 years, we've built tens of thousands of these with every major industry, go-to-market model, customer type, region of the world. And as we've refined this, you've heard probably us talk about that when we're looking for a reframe, we're not just looking at the top 10% of the iceberg that's visible, right? The behaviors that our customers are exerting. We really want to get down below the surface to the 90% of the iceberg's mass that exists down there of what are some of the assumptions and the beliefs that are driving those behaviors. And if we've built credibility effectively, we've truly actively listened, that gives us the right and earns us the right to really dig into this iceberg, dig into this. So how do we build an effective reframe? And we want to give you all a sense of how this is done. The way we talk about it, the way we've come to talk about it in a lot of our messaging sessions as we're working with clients to build out these commercial insights is think about it as an equation. Like any good equation, there are a set of variables, your X, Y, and your Z. Your X is the customer's current approach, your Y is the driver of that current approach, and the Z is the cost associated with the current approach. And these statements should hit three criteria. They should be surprising to the customer, sizable enough for them to do something about it, back to the pain of staying the same, being greater than the pain of change. And third, of course, solvable by us. We don't want to teach the customer into the desert or into the arms of the competition. So how do we actually build this out? So I'll maybe break a challenger rule a bit, because as I like to say, rules are for the obedience of fools and the guidance of wise men and women, and say we actually are just ever so briefly going to talk about your solution. Right now, customers that are working with your solution have a need, they have a problem that your solution solves to create an outcome. But not everyone in the market, as you look across your total addressable market and universe, is a customer. So for those prospects, they ideally have a similar need or a similar problem that they are doing something about to hopefully get towards a similar, if it be suboptimal, outcome. So what is that current approach? That's your X variable. Now, they are doing this for a reason. Now, what are the drivers of that behavior? Whether it's their beliefs or their assumptions, back to the iceberg analogy, or it's the way it's always been done. It's the tradition. And then finally, there is a cost associated with this current approach, whether it's time, it's resources, it's product quality, it's the legal and safety risk. And their awareness of this problem can fall into three buckets. It's unidentified, it's misunderstood, or it's underappreciated. So you put all these variables together, and that is what gives you a reframe. Patek, this is obviously one of the harder aspects of the challenger approach. Commercial insight is the foundation of our ability to truly do this. I guess I would ask you, from your vantage point, both on the front line and enablement, I'll just open it up to you. Is this a good use of enablement's time? How should sellers be thinking about this? What perspective would you share with the group?
Absolutely. First and foremost, John, it has been really amazing working with you, joining our team to make this happen, these insights happen for our company. And what I found the great benefit in this is that we now have these for above the line, what I like to call the C-level team, and below the line, because key here is to really align them both so that the strategy and tactical pieces are all creating the motion to move forward. And once we actually have a new APAC organization, or part of the organization that we just started during COVID. They call us crazy, but we're growing. And for us to enable that team, I literally took the time just to do this training, saying, hey, let's take this formula and show our people how to do this, and the commercial insights that we built together, I also provided them. Literally after that training, our conversion rates went up by 10%, like literally in the same week. So it is extremely important for enablement teams to put this in front of their people. And like I said, John, you've been extremely helpful working with us, working with our marketing team to help us put this framework together and what it is really for Fivetran.
Thank you, Patek. I do truly appreciate that, and I hope that the salespeople on the phone, I absolutely just want to empathize with them that this takes more work, right? It's a lot easier to go in, to your point, and show up and throw up, but if we're truly going to bring unique perspective, we're truly going to create value and make good use of their time, especially in this environment. This is what we got to do. This is the only thing that's been proven to really, drive the needle on this and sustain growth through up economies and down economies. So thank you for that. Well, I know we're going to have a ton of questions on this, so I want to get through this next part, and get through is, well, that's actually a good way to tee up discovery personally as a concept, because it kind of feels like we have to get through this at points. But we want to empathize that discovery calls, like there are questions that we as salespeople fundamentally need to understand. We want to know who the economic buyer is. We want to know what the purchase process looks like. What should it look like? What are some of the pain points that our customer is experiencing? Can we help solve them, etc.? What the challenge that I think we continually see when it comes to discovery process is, this is how we have seen discovery calls out in the market, where there's a set of pre-call research that's done. You build some rapport, you ask some qualifying questions, you engage in a feature and benefit dialogue, and then you look to tee up next steps. And the bubbles, the size of the bubbles, correspond to typically the amount of time that is spent on each of these components. And if your discovery process or your discovery calls look like this, the question I would ask you is, if we consider the data that we've shared with you, understanding that bringing unique insight is the #1 rated skill by buyers of sellers to drive long-term customer loyalty, I'll ask very simply, where are we delivering insight in this process? Where are we delivering that level of value? I think the tough answer to that question is nowhere. And Patek, your experience, Fivetran, Zoom, being in tech, being elsewhere in the industry, do you see other common pitfalls in a traditional discovery process?
The first thing that comes to mind is this is so 1980s. And in my opinion, it's just thinking that if you have this discovery framework, this is just one-time discovery. And that by itself is a problem for me, because discovery is an ongoing part of your entire sales process. So that's one pitfall that I see in here. And then I brought this up one more time. I'm going to do it again. Building rapport is not the pleasantries. Building rapport is actually giving the other person something that they care to know about, and you're going to deliver so much more value with that. So there's some of the, really right away pitfalls that I see with this picture personally, and from what I've observed.
Certainly I agree. And I think to your point, right, discovery is ongoing. It's not just a one-time thing that happens. And I think if you are going to do it, there is a more effective way, right? What we would call discovery, the challenger way. And again, the bubbles are going to correspond, the size of the bubbles are going to correspond to the amount of time we should be dedicating to this. Frankly, more time upfront pre-call planning based on the discussion that you and I have had here today. Building that credibility, using the frameworks and the tips and tricks that we've shared during this call, validating some of the current state, the incorrect assumptions, engaging in that two-way dialogue, having active listening, engaging in active listening, and then using that to really look to reframe that current thinking. All of that leads to a powerful request, a true action item based on the urgency that you've built in your reframe to get the relevant folks in the buying process galvanized and to get next steps moving quickly.
I love that. And there's some really good discovery questions that we can talk about in here too. That's really true to challenger style. And one of the ones that I've actually seen or actually heard from one of our top producers is this question of, who is going to get in the way of you achieving your dreams, this goal that you have? And I love that question because it's really given the other person a chance to tell us, okay, this person is going to be our blocker, and here are the reasons. And it gives you a really chance to build that insight for you to deliver to this person, saying, it sounds like this person could really benefit from this insight, and then insert here. And the benefit of doing that is when that blocker comes into the play, your coach, your champion is going to say, hey, by the way, this is how this will benefit you. So you're giving them a chance to really frame it in a way that you already provided them. So I love that question. And then the other thing is, what do you expect to change if you're not really doing anything? Because if you continue to do the same things, you're going to have the same results.
There's some tension, yeah.
So what do you think is going to happen? And just giving them a chance to really digest that and then help them relive that dream that they have. So those are some great questions you can ask. And I think those are some of those powerful requests and questions that you can bring up at the end.
Yeah, and I'm sure as we get into the Q&A, there's going to be folks giving specific scenarios, and we can expand upon a lot of great, questions to ask in this process. I really like the first one you shared, who's going to stand in the way. It's very emotive, and I think that is part of what effective constructive tension looks like, is getting someone to really feel it viscerally, to visualize the situation they could find themselves in, of thinking about someone else at the organization that could potentially block this.
And somebody's going to. I mean, given that now we have 6 to 8 decision makers, somebody's going to get in the way. Let's get them out of the way right now.
And as we get through this series and we get into mobilizers, talkers, and blockers, that I am sure is going to be a very robust conversation.
Absolutely.
So I bet we've got a ton of questions coming in, so I want to make sure we get to those. I hope we have a ton of questions coming in. So let's talk about some next steps and key takeaways. Right now, for all activation clients available on the activation portal, we have just launched our Engage playbook. So this is a dynamic, interactive, web-based playbook designed to help you accomplish the critical activities and objectives across the Engage stage of the Tempo framework. So we're really excited to launch this. It's the first playbook we've released, and you can imagine and expect, manage and plan to close up across the next couple of weeks and a couple of months. We cover a lot of ground in each of these playbooks, and we're going to go deeper on some of the key themes we've talked about. So be on the lookout for these in particular as you look through establishing the hypothesis, preparing to engage with your customer, having a commercial insight template based on some of the guidance we've shared today, but also some really useful resources and videos on how to manage needs analysis, discovery process, how to run your discovery calls based on the guidance that we've shared here. The next conversation, speaking of constructive tension, just around the corner, October 6th at 11 a.m. Eastern, getting constructive tension right. I've been looking forward to this thing for months. Can't wait to discuss that with all of you. So really quickly before we get to takeaways, Patek, mitigate customer uncertainty by providing unique insight and focusing on the cost of status quo. Number one, credibility starts long before the first call. Remember to do your 3-3-3. Know your why and know your outcome, as you said, Patek. Effective reframes have 3 variables: the customer's current approach, the drivers of that approach, and the cost of that approach. And then finally, when it comes to discovery, this is not a game of 20 questions. Find the way to create value and bring unique insight. Patek, let's take some Q&A.
Let's make it happen, John.
All right. Welcome back, everyone. Thanks so much for the engagement in the Q&A. There's a ton on here, so I want to thank the 700 of you that have stuck around for the additional questions and answers. So, Patek, I know you and I were a bit furious trying to respond to some questions in the moment. There are a couple I saw that I want to pull out. At the top, one of the things that really jumped out to me as we were going through this was specific to credibility. And that upfront, warmer, sharing that insight. What happens when, as we think about the data around the feedback that, hey, you're 50% less effective at delivering insight now than you were last year? How can we get around that? How can we capture their attention when there's so much happening? And I think part of the challenge is there's been so much research done around great companies that steer out of the skid, that innovate now. They're the ones that have outsized returns for their investors, for their clients, for their customers, and for their people. So one of the powerful questions that jumped out to me personally when you run into a situation like that is a concept that I really like, that one of the most powerful things that we can do as a salesperson sometimes is to just hold a mirror to our customers, saying this really empathetic moment of, I get it. Like, you've been heads down in this, truly reactive. Do you think your customers, or how have your customers executed on this shift to move from reactive to proactive? Are they further ahead of you right now than you are? And just introducing and planting that seed of doubt to really get them to think more critically and introspectively about, hey, have I really just truly been reactive, or do I need to talk to this salesperson who's been conversing with more of my peers than I have over the last couple of months to see what I might be missing?
John, I love that. And if you think about that, being reactive is actually the worst thing for risk mitigation. And a lot of the people that we're dealing with right now with uncertainty, that's what they're working on. There's a lot of people are doing risk mitigation. So what you just mentioned should go right to the heart, and they should really take that seriously. The other part is being reactive as an organization. So team, quite frankly, what we've been doing is not going to get us the same results right now. We have to work a lot harder. So go to your marketing teams, go reach out to Challenger. Let's redrive these insights. So yeah, maybe we didn't have the right things up to this point, but it's never too late. And drive this through data. Just have your marketing pull out the right information, the right packaging for you, work with your product team, work with Challenger, and get these done. It's never too late, but you got to get started right now. And we have, for a lot of you, we have 4 months to close the year. So it's not too late, but you want to get started right now. If you do not have resources, you can still reach out to people in the company and ask them what they care for, there are always so many ways to do your homework. There's always so many ways to prepare. Simply ask and be curious.
Well said, Patek. I think I was scrolling through some of the questions, like I said, some of which we answered. Maybe quickly, logistically, I'll answer a couple. For folks asking about the recording and materials, yes, if you are a Challenger Activation client, they're going to be available in the portal. So go ahead and log in after today's meeting. You'll be able to access them. If you're not a client, you can scan the QR code that was on the screen, as well as just reach out to us on our Contact Us page on the Challenger website. Specific to another question that was at the top of the session, when we kind of run through our warm, or the different ways that we build credibility, one of the questions I wrote down was, what if they just agree with our summation? I think, first of all, a couple of things you want to pick apart there. Well, how do they agree? There's one way where they say, yes, actually, you have summarized the challenges I'm faced. I think in that moment, you kind of say to yourself, all right, I've built the credibility. Now I need to share this insight, right? State this hypothesis, ask this question, share my reframe. On the flip side, they may just, agree with what you're saying, where I need to ratchet up the constructive tension. And I think a gentleman by the name of John, great name choice, by the way, your parents have fantastic taste, responded and said it very astutely that we need to invite some skepticism, right? Dial up that constructive tension and say, but, empathetically, well, you're doing this every day, so tell me what I've missed. And I really like that reference that we made of that key accounts manager that basically outlines, hey, this is everything I've learned before talking to you. Tell me what I've missed, or what I've omitted, perhaps.
Absolutely. And then bring up the decision makers. It's not the only decision maker. So ask him, hey, how about the others? What am I missing for the others? Because quite frankly, if you're making a business case, you have to make it well-rounded, and you have to ask for others too. Do not give in to happy ears or commission goggles, whatever you want to call them. Keep asking for more. Yeah.
And I know we've only got a couple of minutes. I want to be respectful of everyone's time, since you've all hung out with us for an additional 20 or so. There was one that came in from Christopher on Challenger tricks and tips on written sales proposals for big prospects to be unique. Patek, you answered this in the moment that, again, what, you know, I agree. When we can, we want to try and deliver a proposal in person to understand the back and forth, but also send over a written proposal. What I would add, of course, is back to our first series in this webinar, stop wasting time on the wrong opportunities. We know that 38% of all purchase attempts end in status quo or no decision. So there are some RFQs or RFPs that are written for potentially our competitors, right? That we will never be able to win. So there are some RFPs, frankly, that we just may want to send a polite response to say, hey, I don't think this is a good fit. But what we would want to share in that feedback is what they have missed in their RFP or their RFQ. Say, hey, we do this every day. If we were going to design this, here are the things that we would encourage you to focus on, or we would encourage you to ask or to hold as a key component, a key strength. And ideally, you're going to be referencing your key differentiators or your key strengths that you know you can beat your competition on and are highly valuable to your customers. Let's see, maybe one more question, just based on what we've seen so far as I go through this. Get access to last month's webinar. Yes, again, if you're a client, go ahead and log into the portal, as well as being able to access a public facing one on our YouTube page, and we'll make sure we get that link out to everybody. Looks like there's one from Barrett here quickly, and I'll let everybody go. Can you remind me what the 333 is again? Yes, that is our preparation framework that basically outlines what are the 3 big changes in your prospect or customer's industry, what are the 3 big objectives the company has undertaken, and what are the 3 main reasons they have done so, basically giving credit to what that current approach is. And it's a fantastic framework to prepare yourself for these sales conversations. It's available again in the Challenger Activation Portal. If you as an individual seller want to learn more, engage with us on the Contact More page. I want to thank everybody for joining. I know we didn't get to all the questions, but Patek, couldn't thank you more for spending some time with us, and looking forward to hearing about Fivetran's continued success and growth.
Thank you, John. And everybody in here, we're on LinkedIn. As you know, we can get connected if you have any questions. Happy to take it to LinkedIn, and then kind of go from there. And thank you so much, John. So happy to be here. Have a fantastic day, everyone.
Thank you all. Please keep the feedback coming. Appreciate it. Have a great week.
Bye.